Hi friends, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today we are going to be revisiting ILNP's Home for the Holidays collection. If you're familiar with my channel, you know that this past year I've been doing a couple of these revisiting retrospective series looking at older ILNP collections, and this is technically my actual last one, but it's not even that old. This collection only came out last winter, but unfortunately I didn't receive it in PR, so I couldn't do a review video. ILNP did end up gifting me this collection when I talked about having it on my wish list for Black Friday, but by the time that I got it in, it was a little too old maybe. I mean, I don't want to say that, but for the purposes of like reviewing a collection and having enough time to grab it, or you know, where it's seasonally appropriate, I feel like it's sort of past the window. But I do think now is the perfect time to share it. This is a 6-piece collection in their jelly hollow flaky formula, which as you might know is my personal favorite finish. So I'm super excited to show you these. I will save more of my thoughts for the end after comparisons, but for now, let's just get into the swatches. The first polish we have is Bear Hug, and this one is described as a cozy cocoa brown hollow jelly. If you've been keeping up with some of my recent videos, you know that I've been talking about how much I have just been loving on brown nail polishes, and this is easily my favorite from the collection. It is just so dark, but so rich at the same time. Definitely one of those really dark browns that can look black in some lighting, but I think in most lighting you can tell that it's brown. This one had a really pigmented, very even coverage formula that was perfectly opaque for me in 2 coats. Next we have Spiced Cider, and this one is described as a burnt umber hollow jelly. Now, if I remember correctly, I think I was the least excited about this one when I first saw the lineup last year. I feel like these really orangey browns are just not usually my favorite, but once I tried this on, I was like, wait a minute, this is actually so gorgeous. I think it's especially fitting for the fall season. It is super beautiful with another really lush and pigmented formula that again was opaque for me in 2 coats. I think this is especially perfect for Thanksgiving. I'm probably going to use it in a skittle. Next up we have Cookie Cutter, and this one is described as a delicious tan hollow jelly. So I was looking forward to this one because I love the idea of like a cookie dough colored polish, especially for a winter collection, but unfortunately I didn't end up loving this one on me. It did have a flawless formula very similar to the other shades in the collection, so it really is just the color and like a personal preference where I just don't think it's super flattering on me, and weirdly enough I feel like it's picking up a little bit more yellow or dingy on camera than it is in real life. I do think in real life it blends in a little bit more to my skin tone, but it still is noticeably darker or warmer compared to the shade that you see in the bottle, which I think is a lot more flattering. The last neutral we have is Sled Day, and this one is described as a creamy light gray hollow jelly. And I'm not gonna lie, I almost forgot that I had this one in my collection because I recently shared my favorite gray polishes, and I feel like this one could easily fit in. It's just that typical hollow flaky formula that I love so much, and I was really impressed with the coverage on this one. I mean, I know it's described as creamy, but I'm always anticipating these formulas to be on the very sheer, translucent jelly side, but this one definitely built up really beautifully in 2 coats. Then we have our classic red with Joy. This one is so stunning. I mean, how can you go wrong with a bright, sparkly red for the holiday season? I feel like this is the typical classic holiday red color as well, where it's almost bright like a cherry, but not super orange leaning. I think I would consider this a pretty neutral red, if not maybe more on the blue tone side. Either way, it is just so beautiful, so sparkly. Not to sound like a broken record, but this one had another flawless formula that was super pigmented but super even coverage. I would say this one definitely had a little bit more visible nail line on 2 coats, but not enough to warrant a third. And rounding out the collection, we have Forest Drive, and this one is described as a rich and earthy holiday green hollow jelly. I would say that's definitely super accurate. When I think of like a winter, especially Christmas green, I think of a green this kind of shade. It might not look super flattering here on the first coat. This one definitely had the most uneven kind of coverage. I think having a paddle brush definitely would have helped with the application for this one specifically, but it did even out really beautifully on two coats. And because this is a darker kind of shade, I also found that it was opaque enough for me on two coats, especially with my shorter nails. And even though this one does look like a super dark green, I feel like you can definitely tell that it's green. And finally, here is the collection worn as a skittle in two coats each in natural lighting. I have both Spice Cider and Bear Hug on my thumb here. And yeah, I am just so in love with this little color palette. It is so cute and cozy. Again, super impressed with the coverage, especially on the lighter shades like Cookie Cutter and Sled Day, where even though my nails are short, I do still have like a little bit of free edge. And so the fact that I didn't see any visible nail line with two coats on these, it was just really impressive. And like I mentioned before, I think it's only in lower lighting where Bear Hug could look black. Now getting into comparisons, we are starting with Bear Hug, and I had to show this next to Shapeshifter, which is one of my favorite dark browns from ILNP. That one is sparkly, but it has more of a metallic kind of flaky as opposed to a holographic one. And the only other dark brown hollow flaky that I have from ILNP is Timber, but as you can see, that's a totally different tone where it's a lot lighter, and I want to say either more neutral or just more yellow leaning. Bear Hug definitely is a little bit on the warmer side, but it doesn't have as much of a reddish undertone as Shapeshifter, so definitely not dupes. I did also want to show this next to Holo Taco's Espresso Your Holo, which even though that one is a crushed holo formula, I thought they looked pretty similar. And I also wanted to show this next to Olive Ave Sequoia, which is a dark brown but more of a linear holo, and you can probably tell from the bottle alone that the shade of brown is a little bit different. So seeing them on the nail, you can see just how warm Bear Hug is compared to the other two, which are cooler and almost more black browns. And I would say that the crushed holo finish is a lot more dense with its flakies. Moving on to Spice Cider, I knew I had to show this next to Hidden Path from the somewhat recent Vineyard collection from earlier in the fall. That one was described as a mahogany brown, but I consider it more orange. And for another sparkly brown, I did want to show this next to Autumn, which is a brown base, but the flakies in that one definitely make it lean more orange. So it is a little bit misleading with how it looks in the bottle, but I feel like side by side on the nail, you can see that Autumn definitely is more similar to Spice Cider than Hidden Path is, but Autumn is only metallic and not holographic, so they're not dupes. Next for Cookie Cutter, I knew I had to see this next to Toasted, which was from the Winter Resort collection that I reviewed earlier this year, but as you can tell, that one is a bit lighter, so I thought something a little bit more similar in color would be Sandbar, even though that one is a magnetic. I'm going to be showing it in two coats unmagnetized, and it ended up being surprisingly similar, at least more similar than Toasted was, which I think is the most neutral. And I do have a couple of bottle comparisons for shades that I thought were going to be more similar. The first one is ILNP's Teddy from the Velvet collection. That one's just a little bit lighter and cooler toned, so definitely not a dupe. Here it is next to Holo Taco's Holo Cappuccino, which again is kind of similar finish-wise with a more dense holo, but the brown is a bit darker. So I thought for a lighter option, I could show it next to Haute Couture, but you can see just how cookie dough colored Cookie Cutter is. So no dupes. Next for Sled Day, I wanted to show this next to Flicker, which is the only other kind of gray that I have from ILNP. That one obviously has a fiery shimmer and no holo, so a closer finish would be Olive Ave's Icicle, which is this dainty holo micro glitter in a gray base, but obviously that is a much lighter gray. It almost looks white here, but on the nail, they definitely are all grays. The Olive Ave is just a little bit lighter, and while Flicker almost looked like a blue-toned gray in the bottle, at least next to Sled Day, I feel like on the nail they definitely look pretty neutral. Then for Joy, I knew I wanted to see this next to Ruby, which is one of my favorite holiday reds. This came out in a New Year's Eve collection a couple of years ago. That one is more of a metallic kind of shimmer shade though, but at least for a color reference. And I also wanted to show this next to Cracked Polish's Eat, Drink, and Be Cherry, which is one of the most recent reds that has come out. That one also is more of a shimmer kind of formula. It doesn't have holo in it. So I feel like these three are looking really similar here on camera. In real life, it's easier to tell them apart. And lastly, I have a couple of Cirque comparisons. The first one is Ruby Slipper, which is their newest red. This one is a magnetic, but I will of course be showing it unmagnetized. But even more exciting, I have this comparison for Cirque's Fire Opal, which sadly has been retired along with a lot of their facets. That line was basically the equivalent of this hollow, flaky jelly finish from ILNP, and this is basically a dupe. I feel like they are just so hard to tell apart. So I think this pretty much confirms this finish from ILNP is a great dupe for Cirque's original facets. And lastly, for Forest Drive, I had to show this next to Holly, which was a super dark green hollow flaky jelly that I picked up last year for Black Friday. That one I would consider to be so dark it's almost black, so I thought a closer kind of green would be Holo Taco's Wicked Potion, which I know is a magnetic, and so it's a totally different finish, but I just thought color-wise it might be similar. It at least looked similar to me in the bottle, but seeing them on the nail, they just do not compare, so I don't have a dupe for this. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for ILNP's Home for the Holidays collection. As always, I would love to know your thoughts on this release. Did you grab them all when they initially came out last year? Or did you only pick up a few of them? Because I remember last year thinking this was such a super cute lineup. I feel like winter or especially holiday collection specifically can be a little repetitive. You know, we always see a red and a green, sometimes the gold and the white. And while this does have a red and green, I really love that the other 4 shades are just these neutrals, because it just makes the perfect kind of color palette to go from the warmer browns for like November and Thanksgiving into the holiday winter season. So no surprise, I just really love these as like a seasonal wearer, and just having the holidays sort of like associated with them without it being like too festive, if that makes sense. And I genuinely was super impressed with the formulas on these, because even though I mentioned that this finish is just like my favorite from ILNP, that obviously means that I have tried a lot of them. So I pretty much knew what to like expect when it came to wearing these, but I was just so surprised to see how pigmented they were, to the point that they were like 2 coaters, because usually for this kind of finish, 2 coats definitely does provide like a decent amount of coverage, but because they are like jellies, you could maybe see a little hint of nail line. Doing a 3rd coat definitely covers that up, but it also like deepens the color a lot more. But I really feel like 3 coats was not necessary for these shades. So that was just really nice to see, like a little bonus in the formulas or the pigmentation for these specifically. I'm still on the fence about how I feel about Cookie Cutter, because I want to love it so much, and I do like it in my skittle here, but I feel like it's still maybe just a little too warm or just too dark for me. But I can't tell how much of that is from my staining, because as you saw, I feel like my swatch just looked even darker than what you see in the bottle. But for some reason here on my pointer finger, I feel like it doesn't look as dark as it did initially, so I kind of like it more. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this review. I'm just kind of gushing over these at this point because I just think they're so beautiful. So again, let me know if you did already grab these last year, or if you're going to be picking them up for Black Friday this year. As of recording this, ILNP hasn't really announced any Black Friday details, but I will update the description box as soon as I'm aware of what those are. But usually it's like from actual Black Friday Friday through Cyber Monday, and usually 25% off. So fingers crossed that that's the same this year. I might actually be posting this after the holiday. So if you did celebrate Thanksgiving, I hope that it was wonderful. And if you don't celebrate, or if this was like a really hard time of year, since I know that it can be for a lot of people, I hope that you have a really great weekend and just know that you are loved and so, so special. I hope you all take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.